So this book begins showing the relationship between pieces, like the knight and pawn, the bishop and pawn, the rook and pawn, and then basic pawn structures. At the moment we are still in the beginning of the book, and we are going to watch game 3, which was played in Gothenburg, 1955, between Hermann Pilnik, white, and Efim Geller, black. The format used by the author is to bring us to a certain point and generally ask evaluation or show us what is important in that particular position. This chapter is dedicated to the knight. So e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and we are watching these games on a Szkolnik chess set, which is from the 1960s, Soviet Union, or also Ukraine. I don't know if in that time you could say this Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union or not. I know that everybody has a different opinion, so I don't really care. I'm just telling you, okay? C takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3. I love the felt of these pieces because it's really soft and it's amazing when you move them. It's really nice. d6, bishop e2, e5, knight b3, bishop e7, castle, castle, bishop e3, bishop e6. As you can see, generally in the Sicilian there is this d5 square that is an outpost. In game number 2 we realize that also f5 is an important outpost. Bishop f3, a5, knight d5, bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and knight b8, c4, knight f6, bishop d2, b6, bishop c3, knight c5. So as you can see, also black is occupying his own outpost, right? And this is another outpost, d4, and f4 is another outpost. The problem is that d4 obviously is controlled by white, f4 isn't, but it cannot still go there at the moment. Let's see what happened in the game. So after knight c5, knight takes c5, b takes c5. This is now a very strong outpost, in the sense that if black goes there and is taken, it creates a pass pawn. And black was able to open a file, a semi-file, thanks to this exchange. So if you had to evaluate the position, obviously you would say, well, black is good, right? Because you see, white has the bishop pair, but these bishops are not controlling much, honestly. So this is not an open position where the bishops pair, it's really strong. It seems that this bishop pair is not strong at all. Okay. Queen e1, knight d7. So here we see already one thing, that black is repositioning the knight, is opening the diagonal for this bishop, and maybe is also opening, cioè moving from this in order to advance. That's a possibility, right? Bishop d1, a4. So black is trying to take away possible squares from, because you see, if he didn't do a4, track, it's a great outpost, right? Instead, a4 has obviously taken away something. Let's see what happened. Bishop c2, and this is a repositioning of a bishop. You see, tack, so he goes to attack on the king side. This makes sense. But look what he did, black, f5, like I told you. The idea was to advance the pawns. Rook d1, g6, queen e2, bishop f6. And now there is f3. At this point we are black to move, and as always the author puts here a diagram, and it doesn't ask you evaluation, but I do. What do you think black should do, right, at this point? Here it says, the very first glance conveys the impression that black is clearly better. Okay, why black is better? Because you can see he has more space. That's a fact, right? He has more space. And, for example, there are two beautiful outposts here for white, but he doesn't have a knight to jump here. Here would be perfect, right? So that's a problem. As you can see, it's also a problem sometimes when you don't have the right piece for the right pawn formation. And this is something Fischer knew well. In fact, there is a book by Soltis in which he shows all these kind of exchanges that Fischer did in order to get his pieces in advantageous position, and then once that advantage was achieved, he would often exchange it for a real material advantage that couldn't be taken away. And then from there, for him it was technique. He would just solve the position and be able to convert it technically into a win. Okay, so he says black is clearly better. Good pieces, the pawn pair f5 and e5, right? Control the central square. Imagine 1, 2, 3, 4. And the semi-open b file on the queen side, a leap to bi. But how should he continue? How do you continue in this position? The breakthrough e5, e4 for the moment being prevented by white, and on the b file the otherwise inactive white bishop pair is keeping an eye on the entry squares. So he's saying that the b file, yes, is open for black, but if all the squares that you can try to enter are controlled by white, it's kind of useless, right? Yet, look what black did. Black played e4. At the cost of a pawn, black gets the ideal square for his knight, e5, as well as a pawn majority on the king side, which nothing is stopping him from advancing. Interesting. So let's see what happens. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, f takes e4, f4. Oh, so this is the pawn king side majority, the king side pawn majority. 3 against 2, okay? Rook f2 and knight e5. Great move. Yeah, now you can see that black has a really great outpost. Why? Because there is not anymore the dark square bishop. So nothing can actually move this knight out of the way. And like always, the author tell you this, instead of knight e5, it says queen takes b2 is not good. Obviously, in some positions, you need to be able to occupy and stop the opponent from moving, because he could move this, right? He could move it. So this is the move to play, because it blocks everything from white and maintain the pressure. There is a pressure right here that he can do. So let's see what happens. Rook d, f1, obviously. Queen h4. Bishop d1 and rook f7 is a typical way in which strong players go about things. They always make sure that all their forces are engaged in the struggle. Since white does not even have a whiff of counterplay, Geller prepares the later deployment of the as yet inactive a-rook before starting the operation on the king side. Yeah, this is also called prophylaxis, and you avoid that your opponent can do anything as counterplay, right? Because if you don't do that, there will be a move that will make you pay, probably, right? So let's see how it continues. Queen c2, g5, queen c3, rook a, f8. Now, this maneuver is interesting because you understand black is all going forward on here. It's gonna be real, probably h5 and h4 if we can do it. Let's see what happens, right? Yeah, you see that I just thought it and I see it in the game. He plays h3 and the other play immediately h5. Immediately. And now white makes a mistake. He plays bishop e2. He says he had to take on a4. Here it says the basic rule is if your opponent leaves something and pre, the first thing to do is to check the possible capture. If you cannot find a refutation, you must start from the point of view that your opponent has blundered the material. Never believe that he has made a correct sacrifice. That holds true whatever the playing strength of your opponent may be. Well, if his name is Komodo or Stockfish, you can have confidence in the tactical development. Okay, so if it's a human being, you take it if you don't find the solution, the refutation. Yet here I find one thing which is interesting. He played bishop e2, but it doesn't say to us if there are other possibilities. No, there are not. I thought this, but I didn't think of this, maybe. And so it's a mess. No, I don't think it works. Okay, bishop e2, g4, and now he makes a mistake that loses immediately, which is rook takes f4. Why this loses immediately? Well, let me show you. Rook takes f4. Rook takes f4. Rook takes f4. g3. And now there is knight f3. King f2, queen takes h3, g takes f4, g3, king takes f3, g2, and now there is a problem, which is after this there is queen h2, the so-called winning move. Why the winning move? Because if you play this, check, takes, and boom, gets another queen before you can even say ah. I hope you enjoyed it. Here there is a last quote which says, in chess I always seek something which suits me. Risky play in the style of chess musketeers is not my thing, even though it pleases many friends of sharp twists and turns. And the one who had this quote was Anatoly Karpov. Once more, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the game. Let's see more from this great book.